The afternoon sun poured across the sprawling backyard, turning the surface of the pool into a sheet of shimmering blue. Beyond the tall privacy walls stood a modern mansion overlooking the city, the kind of home most people only saw in magazines. But for Marcus Reed, the property was more than a symbol of wealth. It represented 20 years of sacrifice, rejection, sleepless nights, and decisions that could have broken a less determined man. At 42, Marcus was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country. Yet on that quiet Saturday afternoon, none of that mattered to him. He had taken off his watch, left his phone inside, and settled into a lounge chair beside the pool with a book in his hands. For once, Marcus was simply enjoying the peace he had worked so hard to earn. Then the gate buzzer sounded. Marcus looked toward the entrance, expecting perhaps a delivery or a neighbor. Instead, two uniformed security officers appeared beyond the gate, accompanied by a woman and a man he had never seen before. The woman pointed toward Marcus's house as they spoke. Even from a distance, something about the conversation felt wrong. Marcus stood and walked toward them, still wearing the casual clothes he had chosen for a day of relaxation. "Can I help you?" he asked. One of the officers looked Marcus up and down before asking, "Are you the owner of this property?" Marcus paused. The question itself was simple. The way it was asked was not. "Yes," he replied. "I am." The woman beside the officers folded her arms. "We received a complaint about someone who doesn't belong here." Marcus stared at her. "Someone who doesn't belong here?" She glanced at the officers. "The residents around here are concerned. They said there was an unfamiliar man using the pool." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. He looked down at himself, then back at the enormous house behind him. His name was engraved on the property documents. His company had offices in 3 countries. He had appeared on business covers and spoken at universities. Yet none of those accomplishments had entered the minds of the people standing before him. They had looked at his skin before they looked at his identity. "I live here," Marcus said calmly. One officer asked to see identification. Marcus reached for his wallet. As he handed over his driver's license, he noticed the woman whispering to the man beside her. The officer examined the card, then looked at Marcus again. "This says Marcus Reed." "That's correct." "And you're the homeowner?" "Yes." The officer handed the license back, but instead of leaving, he asked another question. "Can you prove that?" Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, not anger exactly, something deeper. He had spent years learning how to remain composed when people underestimated him. He had learned that anger could be used against you, especially when someone was already determined to see you as a threat. So he took a breath. "Officer," he said, "you came here because someone reported a stranger. You have now confirmed that I am not a stranger. I am the owner of this home. What exactly are you asking me to prove?" The officer hesitated. Before he could answer, the woman stepped forward. "We're just trying to keep this neighborhood safe." Marcus looked directly at her. "Safe from what?" She didn't answer. That silence said everything. Marcus could have shouted. He could have demanded apologies. He could have called his attorneys immediately. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone. He invited them inside. The officers exchanged glances. Marcus walked toward the front door and opened it. "If we're going to have this conversation," he said, "let's have it properly." Inside the house, Marcus placed his identification and property documents on the dining table. He showed the officers the deed, utility records, and other documents confirming his ownership. The evidence was undeniable. The mood changed instantly. The woman who had complained suddenly looked uncomfortable. "I didn't know," she whispered. Marcus looked at her. "That's the problem." She lowered her eyes. "You didn't know who I was, and you didn't need to. But you decided I didn't belong in my own home based on what I looked like." One of the officers quietly apologized. Marcus appreciated the words, but he knew an apology alone would not solve what had happened. Then Marcus noticed something on the security monitor. His property cameras had recorded the entire interaction. He looked at the screen, then back at the officers. "Everything that happened outside is recorded." The officers nodded. Marcus continued, "And I'm going to preserve the footage." The woman immediately became nervous. "Why?" "Because accountability matters." Those 3 words changed the room. Marcus wasn't threatening anyone. He wasn't trying to embarrass them. He was simply refusing to let the incident disappear into an uncomfortable memory. Later that evening, Marcus called his attorney and reviewed the footage. His lawyer advised him to document everything and consider whether the incident violated local policies or laws. Marcus agreed, but he decided he wanted something more than personal satisfaction. The next morning, Marcus released a carefully written statement through his company and personal social media accounts. He did not identify the woman or the officers. He did not insult anyone. Instead, he described what happened and explained why it mattered. He wrote that owning a beautiful home did not make him more deserving of dignity. Being a CEO did not make him more human. His wealth did not protect him from assumptions based on race. I should not have to become a millionaire before someone believes I belong in my own backyard, he said. The statement spread quickly. Thousands of people responded. Some shared stories of being questioned in places where they lived, worked, studied, or shopped. Others admitted that they had never considered how quickly assumptions could turn into accusations. Marcus could have stopped there, but he decided to turn the incident into something constructive. He established a community initiative focused on fair treatment, neighborhood dialogue, and education about racial bias. He invited local residents, law enforcement representatives, business leaders, and young people to participate. At the first meeting, Marcus stood before the audience and told them that revenge was never his goal. I don't want anyone humiliated, he said. I want people to think before they act. I want the next person standing by a pool, sitting on a porch, walking through a neighborhood, or unlocking their own front door to be judged by what they do, not by the color of their skin. The room became silent. Marcus looked around and added, my success didn't make me worthy of respect. I was worthy of respect before I had a company, before I had money, and before anyone knew my name. Those words became the heart of the story, because Marcus had not turned the tables by destroying the people who had humiliated him. He had turned the tables by refusing to let their assumptions define him. He had used his resources not to build a wall around himself, but to open a door for others. Weeks later, Marcus returned to the same pool. The afternoon was quiet again. He placed his book beside the chair, removed his watch, and looked across the water. For a moment, he remembered the officers standing at his gate, the accusation, the question about whether he belonged. Then he smiled. Not because the experience had been acceptable. It wasn't. He smiled because they had tried to reduce him to an assumption, and he had answered with something more powerful than anger: dignity, truth, and action. Marcus leaned back and opened his book. The pool was still his. The home was still his. But now the lesson belonged to everyone who had been made to feel like they didn't belong. And perhaps that was the real victory. Not proving that Marcus Reed deserved to be there, but making it impossible to ignore the question of why anyone had doubted it in the first place.